Just on what you were talking about with the cuts, you were saying that basically you found everything that you were looking for there. Does that mean that's the end of the job losses, that train has left the station?
Well, what it means is that all agencies have been given a final answer as to what their savings need to look like, and then they can plan with confidence about the future.
So how many agencies have been exempt from the 6.5 or 7.5 percentage point cuts to their budget?
Well, you will have seen we previously released a list of all of the agencies and their targets. There are a few agencies who have not met their target, and that's for good reasons. So, for one example, the New Zealand Police. They were able to convince us that reaching their target would involve potentially making changes that would undermine their frontline service provision. So we just weren't prepared to go through with that. That meant they didn't reach their target, but at the same time, as I say, there are other agencies who went above and beyond their target. And so what that means is there are some unders, there are some overs. Altogether, it adds up that we will deliver the savings.
So police and who others? Who are the others?
I'm going to leave some of this to budget day for you to see. Look, one other example I'm happy to talk about today is that FAHA did not make savings this year.
They didn't reach their target. How far did they get to?
Oh, look, they have made a contribution to the savings, and that's the right thing because they identified they did have consultant and contractor spend, they did have the potential for back office efficiency, and it's been really good to see that approach across agencies.
Now that you've met the goal, can you give an assurance that there will be no more budget cuts, no more job losses?
Well, what I've always said is that our focus is on delivering better frontline services. What that doesn't mean is that we promise to never change things or do things differently or do things better, because we don't accept that the status quo is working for everyone, and so we can't keep things the way they are. So we, in future, of course, we will make changes to government agencies if we think they're needed to deliver better results for New Zealanders.
How far into the future will that be? Because there have been such big cuts now, people will be worried as to when they might expect further cuts. So what sort of reprieve period can people expect?
You can expect our government to have an ongoing focus on making the most of every taxpayer dollar. And you've got to remember the context here. We've had more than 16,000 public servants added in just 6 years. And I can tell you that our reprioritisation will go nowhere near that number.
So the message is you will make more cuts if you need to?
No, the message is I pledge to every New Zealander that when we are in charge of your money, we will always look to drive the most value from it. That will mean having public agencies that can support frontline services, that are doing innovative things. But I promise that the state of always looking, can we do it better for you? That's going to keep going.
Who are some of the agencies that found more than they needed to in savings?
Well, I want to keep that for budget day, but what I did do today was highlight some examples where every single dollar has gone back into the front line. So an example there is the Ministry of Education. They have done significant work to identify consultancy spend that they could reduce, to identify programs of activity that, while they were well intended, were not delivering maximum value, to find back office savings. And every single dollar of that is now going to be reinvested in the front line, and that means more money for our early childhood services, more money for our schools, more money for our tertiary providers, and that's exactly what we promised New Zealanders we would do, and I'm really glad we're delivering it.
The 3% figure in your speech, is that the other 17%, is the fact that they're missing out a result of the fact that not everyone pays income tax, or is that a result of changes that you've made between what you campaigned on and what you're actually delivering?
The former.
In terms of just going back to the cuts, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, are they one of the agencies that hasn't met the 6.5% threshold?
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade has delivered some savings.
But is it 6.5%?
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade has delivered some savings, and you'll see the overall quantum of those savings on budget day.
Why are they exempt? I can understand police.
They're not exempt. They were given a target. They have worked on their target and they have delivered savings.
What was their target?
They had a target of 6.5%.
So Defence at 6.5?
Defence, I would want to check that. I think they may have, because there was a difference between the Defence Force and the Ministry of Defence, so I just want to check that. But what I can absolutely confirm for you is that Defence have made some savings. However, again, like education, the overall quantum of investment into defence will increase in this budget. So every dollar of savings that we have found will be reinvested in new equipment and increased funding for defence services. That is an area that we have prioritised for a modest investment. In the longer term, we want to see more significant pick-up in investment in that area so that New Zealand can contribute effectively to our global partnerships. And in this budget, you'll see a modest uplift.
Modest investment.
Yes.
Are we going to get much closer to 2%, 1.4%, 1.5%? How are we going to get there?
Well, the Defence Minister's immediate focus has been on a capability review to ensure that when we make those investments, we invest in the right things. So it's important that we have the right kit. That means that we can be helpful to our Pacific neighbours when they need us, but also that we can work well with those countries we're in security relationships with. And so that means identifying really carefully what's the equipment we should be getting, is it the right stuff, and not contracting vast sums of New Zealanders' money for things that aren't actually the right things for the future challenges New Zealand will face.
Can I just be really clear on the Mfat fact? Was their target 6.5%? You said it was their target. Have they met that 6.5% cut?
I'm not going to go through every agency today and tell you whether or not they met their target. We will make that absolutely transparent on budget day. You will see what their target was, what they delivered, and how that lines up with other agencies, because I recognise that it's in the public interest for people to see that. I'm just going to leave that to budget.
I'm just a little confused because I thought everybody had a 6.5%. It was across the board, and now you're saying they had a different target?
No, everybody either had a 6.5 or 7.5% target, depending on what their headcount increases had been in the past few years. What I've also said is that some agencies delivered on their targets, some agencies didn't deliver on their targets, some agencies went above and beyond their targets. So it's been a matter of, here's your target, but I never said that that was an absolute. Some people, when they put forward the proposals that were needed to meet that target, our judgment was, actually, we don't want to progress all of
So
that.
did Mfat meet that absolute target?
Mfat delivered savings, and you'll see exactly how many on budget day.
Well, can you just expand further on that comment that this budget will, your efforts will create as many jobs as have been cut?
So what I asked the Treasury to do together with the Public Service Commission was a bit of an analysis of how many roles that they thought would potentially be disestablished as a result of the savings exercise that we have run. Now, obviously, that's not final because many of those proposals are still under consultation. So they've given me a rough guide at this point. And then what I also asked them to do was look at the investments we're making in the budget, 500 extra police, investments in the correction service, significant uplift in funding for the health service, funding into our schools and ECE centres. And I said, can you calculate for me roughly how many roles you think we're creating? And what those indicative numbers show is that the latter number is bigger than the former number. That is, we're creating more frontline roles than we are disestablishing roles through the savings exercise.
And is that
To make that comparison, because a lot of those new roles, they would have been created regardless. Not all of them would have come from that office savings being reprioritised to the front line. So is it a bit cheeky to kind of make it?
There's nothing cheeky about an extra police officer, an extra nurse, or an extra corrections officers. That is a real job for a real person, and it's us delivering on what we said we would do, which is prioritising frontline services.
But is it a bit apples and oranges? I mean, the people who are losing their jobs aren't all going to become police officers.
No, and I'm not arguing that. I'm just simply saying that while our budget is doing what we said it would do, which is reducing spending in public sector agencies where there has been significant growth in the back office, at the same time, our budget is also creating public service roles. The nature of those roles is different.
And when you talk about the roles disestablished, is that including the roles that people weren't in that have been cut, or is it literal jobs that have been disestablished? Do you understand that?
Yeah, look, that is a really good question. So there's a number of things going on, something I have noticed in Stuff's coverage. is that sometimes they are conflating restructures or programs of activity that were set in action before we came into government, or proposals that have been long planned by departments. My number relates to role reductions as a result of the savings exercise. What I am working on, because I recognise, again, this is something that people will be interested in, is making sure that we can carefully articulate that number in a way that is transparent. I also want to do that in a way that's respectful, so I am waiting for the consultation exercises which are underway to continue in good faith. It's really important that we let that happen.
Do you have a rough number at the moment?
Is that too data-driven, and does it lack a human touch?
It is all about a human touch. We fail too many New Zealanders because we don't have the rigour of saying, is the service we're providing working for you? It is not enough to have good intentions and to have a warm heart. You actually have to make a difference to people's lives. And the truth is, there are some programs in our communities which are incredible and have delivered amazing results. There are other programs that aren't quite as effective. And we owe it to every New Zealander to make sure we're dialling up the things that are working and we're dialing down the things that aren't working as well, so we can use those precious dollars to make more change.
If the social investment approach was operational currently, do you think we'd have less people on the benefit?
I think if it was up and running, yes, we would have less people on the benefit, because fundamentally we would be breaking cycles of disadvantage earlier in people's lives.
You mentioned the 16
Labour will say.
portfolios we're keen to get involved in this agency. Can you give examples of which ones are already on board?
Oh, well, the Minister for Whānau Ora, the Minister for Disability Services, the Minister for Oranga Tamariki, the Minister for Education, the Minister for Corrections, the Minister for Police, just about everyone with a portfolio that touches people with social services on the front line wanted to be involved, because all of us, I think, as ministers, as New Zealanders, have the same frustration, which is, of course, if we could prevent a child offending so badly that they need to be going to a military academy, if we could wind back in their lives 15 years and make an intervention that would actually see them developing their potential better, see them going on a better pathway in life, we would make that intervention every day of the week. But the problem is, successive governments have had good intentions in this area, make a range of investments, but don't do enough to measure what's working and make sure that we're dialling up the things that make a difference.
Labour will say that, well, we continued on with the agency, they rebranded it the Social Welfare Agency, forgive me if I've got that incorrect, but and that, you know, that work has continued. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd just say the proof will be in the results, and I remember the frustration of asking questions at Select Committee about what changes had been made using a social investment approach, and I can't recall Labour pointing to any. And I take the challenge on board, which is actually social investment will be judged by the investments that we make and the difference that they make.
And so an outcome within the 6 years there and
So the reason I am making the seed investment in this year's budget is so that we can have social investments up and running in next year's budget, set up with an analytical framework and an evidence-based approach so that you can judge for yourselves whether they're working. Now, here's the thing. Some of them might not work, but the difference is we need to be honest when we're not and flip to the things that are working quickly.
How long does it take, though? I mean,
For the Whānau Ora commissioning agencies, is there anything in any discussions at the moment about where they will sit as part of the social investment agency?
Yeah, look, I have been having a lot of discussions with Tama Potaka, the Minister for Whānau Ora, about the alignment and the approach between what Whānau Ora does and what we want social investment to deliver. I think one of the strengths of Whānau Ora has been that it's not about a big government agency coming in and doing a one-size-fits-all approach. It's actually about grassroots organisations building trust with individual whānau and using those relationships to make a range of interventions. It's quite possible that we would work with those Whānau Ora agencies to deliver some social investments.
But they won't come in under the social investment agency, they won't bring it autonomy?
Not in the first instance, no.
Not in the first instance?
No, it's not even on my agenda, Mikey.
In your speech, you mentioned the dread that you felt hearing the forecasts. You talked about it being the darkest before the dawn. I mean, in terms of this budget, are you underselling how bleak it's going to be, or is it really going to be a grim set of documents?
Well, I think you only need to talk to New Zealanders to know that that the economy hasn't been in great shape. You can't have inflation as high as it has been for as long as it's been, interest rates this high without seeing some effects. And if you look at the monthly financial statements, which we have published, they show that the corporate tax take is well down on what was forecast. That's because businesses are making far fewer profits because the economy is not going as well as the government had forecast. So I do expect that high interest rates and high inflation will continue to take a toll on New Zealanders. And I think I owe it to people to be honest about that, upfront about that, not to pretend that on the 30th of May I'm going to deliver a document that will solve everyone's problems overnight and wipe every tear from every eye. But what I will do is deliver a plan to get us out.
And you said that there's, I can't remember what it is, I'm sure you'll correct me, 20 sleeps till the budget.
Yeah.
How much sleep are you actually going to get? Because it sounds like it's weighing on you quite a bit.
Yeah, not enough sleep, Jason.
Is it disappointing not to be able to have the financial parameters in the first budget to be able to do some of the things that maybe you've been dreaming about doing when thinking about getting this portfolio?
I think New Zealanders voted for us knowing we're good at doing clean-up jobs, that we're good at making more of less, and that's the job that we're doing. And if we do that job well, there is such great prospects ahead, because actually if we grow the economy, we give people more confidence, we will have more wealth, we will have more opportunities to invest for the future, we will have more choices for New Zealanders. So that's what it's all about. And look, I don't spend a day complaining about the choices we face. It is way harder to be a person in the squeeze middle worrying about the groceries, worrying about the rent, than it is to be the finance minister.
What's your response to reportage around Treasury advice in 2016 saying that fiscally neutral changes are not counted against the operating allowance? You said that you're funding that's out of the operating allowance.
We are funding our tax reduction out of our operating allowance, and we are delivering them in a fiscally neutral way.
And what do you say to the Treasury advice, though, that says that you can't, fiscally neutral changes can't be counted against the operating allowance?
Look, I'd have to see the full advice in its context to understand what it's saying. What I can tell you absolutely and very confidently is we're delivering our tax reduction package within a smaller operating allowance than had been forecast by the previous government, that we will fully fund our tax reduction through savings and revenue measures, that they will be fiscally neutral, and therefore, on the advice that we've received, will be less inflationary than government spending.
Are you able to explain just how that works? So the tax package is, $3 or so billion a year, right? So your new revenue measures and your cuts are worth that amount, and then you've got a 3.5 less operating allowance, and that is the new spending that you add to departments. Is that how that works?
Well, it's more simple than that, really. We go into the budget with an operating allowance of new funding that we've committed to investing. We then have savings that we have identified that add to that amount of cash that's available. We then have revenue measures that add to that cash that's available. We then have reprioritisations that add to that cash that's available. We then take that amount of money and we say, well, this much is going to tax reduction, this is going to health, this is going to education, and altogether it means that we are not needing a larger operating allowance of new money than the last government.
The total pool was about $7 or $8 billion.
I'm not giving you numbers today, but nice try.
And just that nugget about Treasury telling you that the multiplier on tax cuts is lower than spending. Is that new? In the past, I've heard Treasury kind of not really take a view on which one's better or worse.
Well, you can imagine I've been really interested in this question as we've developed our budget, because it has been the advice that I've previously received and that I've read, that where tax reduction is delivered through reprioritising what would have otherwise been government spending, that it can be disinflationary. So that is a question that I have engaged with Treasury on, and the advice that I shared with you today is the advice they've given me.
Minister, just on defence, at a time where you're prioritising a lot of savings, cutting jobs, it's clearly a big message to be spending money on defence. Why do you think, given everything that given the limited amount of money and everywhere that you need to spend, that you're spending on defence?
Because unfortunately we are living in a far less stable world. We face genuine threats, and we owe it to the countries we work with to be making our contribution. We owe it to our Pacific neighbours to be able to be there when they need us. And I had a really sobering experience recently. I went to a dinner in DC with finance ministers from around the world. On one side of me was the Ukrainian finance minister, literally in an existential fight for his nation's future. And on the other side of me was the Polish finance minister, who is spending 4% of his GDP on defence. And those were not realities just a few years ago. And so New Zealand needs to be sober about that reality. We need to be safe. And so it's important that we take responsible decisions to make the investments required.
Is this about increasing New Zealand's deterrence capability, or is it about literally building our defence force from the ground up?
Look, the Defence Minister is obviously the best person to talk to about the capability build that we are doing. As I've said to you, we're looking at a modest uplift in this budget, but we recognise there's a bigger piece of work to do about what are those long-term capability requirements that we have. And as I've said, part of that is about how we turn up in our own backyard for our Pacific neighbours. Part of that is about being interoperable with our defence partners. And part of that is about looking after our own piece of ocean. As I say, the Defence Minister is engaged in that exercise. She is the best person to talk to about the detail of it. But we recognise that relative to many other countries, New Zealand hasn't been investing that much in defence.
Sorry, really quickly, why did you guys block the legislation to, or the bill to increase Peter Bosch's term or the age limit restrictions on the Ombudsman?
Oh, look, we just view that it's not appropriate to make an entire law change based on one individual.
He's a pretty good individual, at least.
Yeah, I like him. Yeah. I like him.
Is there a scope to extend his term in other ways? Is there some sort of loophole?
No, look, he is there now, and that sits within the legal framework, and he will be there until we find a replacement.
So could you just not find a replacement for it as long as you like?
I think the appointment sits with Paul Goldsmith, and it's in his intention to find a replacement. Thank you.